The Utopian Seed Project presents Southeast Seed. Tremendous thanks to this episode's presenting sponsor, So True Seed.
Can you show me your corn cob?
No.
I love corn.
You love corn.
The diversity of corn is astounding, and people just don't realize it. It's not just yellow and white.
Corn is one of the most beautiful things in the world to me.
Today we're going to talk about corn. 9,000 years ago it was a wild grass, and today it feeds the world. All because, generation after generation, we've saved its seeds.
We shaped corn, and corn shaped humanity. The Americas wouldn't be the Americas if it wasn't for corn.
We're going to explore the astonishing variety of corn that exists today, as well as the techniques that seed savers use to preserve them and adapt them to a changing environment. And along the way, because we're talking about corn, we'll inevitably run into questions of heritage and ownership. Who can claim the corn that we grow today? We'll start by talking to Stephen Smith, a corn breeder.
This is the oldest corn that exists in the world still. This is maize chapalote. It's mainly found in the drier regions of Mexico. And this brown color comes from the original ancestor of corn, which is these weird stony teeth-like things called teosinte. When it was taken from teosinte, domesticated from teosinte, it was not eaten for the ear at first. Early indigenous people chewed the stalks because they're like sorghum and sugarcane. They're
like
full
the
of
inside
sugar.
of grass.
Yeah.
I sit around and eat
Yeah, exactly.
grass
That's what they
insides.
did.
It's really big, nice grass inside.
Yeah. Once it was domesticated, it went out of Mexico pretty early into Central America. It reached Guatemala first. This is a white popcorn from Guatemala.
Since its domestication in Mexico, corn has traveled across the Americas and diversified into many distinct forms. There's popcorn, which is eaten by popping, and then there's flint corn, which is ground into flour and cornmeal. Then, of course, there's sweet corn, which is eaten before the kernels are fully mature, and then there's dent corn, which is identifiable by a characteristic little dent.
The differences between a dent and a sweet corn is you see on the end of the kernel how it has that little dent in
It's
it.
dented.
It is. It looks like you press your fingernail into it.
Yeah.
Variety of different uses. We've got Pennsylvania varieties that are great for popcorn.
This is Chorpy. This is the original Peruvian ancestor of all sweet corn. A lot of the other corn from South America that is like some of the most colorful in the world. This is the biggest in the world. And then you have other types of corn, like this, what I call cow corn. It's just even more beautiful. But this is a lot of the diversity that people just has no idea that exists. This is a Seneca, Haudenosaunee, Iroquois variety called Seneca Blue Bear Dance. It's usually called Murado or Coulis, candy striped apron. A lot of my stuff has speckles just because I love speckles. It's called Eagle corn. I breed for color. These are actually hot pink. It is a Navajo corn crossed to a South American corn, even more speckled.
There are thousands of varieties of corn adapted to basically every American climate, from mountains to plains to rainforests, and the ones that made their way to the American colonies bear the marks of that colonial history.
The colonists didn't have sweet corn until the 1700s when Washington ordered General Sullivan to raid the villages to get corn.
There were sweet corns that were possessed by the Dakota people and sweet corn that was possessed by the Iroquois. And it was the Iroquois sweet corn that was seized during the American Revolution and became the basis for the sweet corns that were bred in America.
They stole the corn, they burned the corn. It was weaponized and used as a means of control.
Of the many, many corn varieties grown in pre-Columbian America, colonists took a small number and began to breed them intensively, creating new inbred hybrid varieties that were more productive than anything that had been grown before.
Corn is always hybridized with each other, but what we call modern dent corn, the yellow and white corn that you see in the field that is used to make pretty much anything today, that's only existed for roughly 200 years, since the 1840s. I'm descended from one of the people that was the pioneer that created that kind of corn. The Reed family. Regilla dent was the most famous corn ever created. It was the staple dent corn all across the U.S., all over the world, and I'm descended from that family. But Robert Reed and his son James Reed, they only created Reed's yellow dent because they planted a local corn in Ohio where they were living at the time. And they had weird weather, they had a terrible crop, and they planted another corn, a flint corn, and they crossed together. And it was an accident that it was created, but once that was created and that was published in all of the journals and agricultural newspapers, farmers started crossing corn together to make more productive types, and that's how U.S. dent corn came to be. All hybrid U.S. corn is descended from about 3 varieties of dent corn. Mostly Reed's Yellow Dent. That's like 99% of all U.S. corn.
Reed's Yellow Dent, Lancaster Sharecropper, and maybe 1 or 2 others. And then it was inbred lines from those few varieties that are used for all of our corn acreage. So there's almost no genetic diversity at all. It's why yields are so high, but it's also why the corn crop's so vulnerable. It's too uniform.
If we were to have a COVID pandemic, but in a plant form, not only would the U.S. go into a severe famine, the world would, because all the corn would be wiped out. It would only take one bacteria, fungus, insect or something to become resistant to whatever they're putting into corn to keep bugs and everything out of it, which has already happened. And it could wipe out the whole corn crop all over the world. It's coming. It's just a matter of when. It's not if, it's when.
As corn developed into a major commodity crop, variety stewardship and breeding shifted from indigenous communities to colonial farmers and then to industrial agribusinesses. And with this shift, corn became more productive, more inbred, and more dependent on mechanization. It became harder for small farmers to access locally bred varieties developed for their specific climate because those traditional breeding techniques had stopped being common knowledge.
Breeding has pretty much exclusively gone into the private sector now, but in the southeast and I guess somewhat the southwest especially, it's really stagnated because it's a cycle where yields are not high enough to justify more breeding of local corn for down here. And because there isn't enough breeding, yields don't go high enough to justify farmers growing it, and because farmers don't grow enough corn, breeders don't want to breed it. It's just a feedback loop. So someone has to do it. Most of the traditional farmers, they weren't just farmers, they were farmer breeders. And a lot of people now, they do the production part, the farming part, but they don't do the curation, the breeder part. You need to do both. And you really have to have an eye for this stuff. And actually among most of the First Nations people, usually it was the women who did it, were the ones who did a lot of the seed selection. And they really had an eye for what type of traits to look for and how to maintain a population. And a lot of that knowledge is just gone.
Actually, the women were traditionally the farmers, especially among the Haudenosaunee people and the Wabanaki people where I'm from in the Northeast. The women were the farmers, and that's actually fairly common among most tribes. As the women would take corn and select what was going to be saved and what was going to be eaten, they would be braided and hung from platforms to be air dried. You have to have it dry, it has to be good quality, you can't have anything wrong with it, you can't have bugs in it or fungus because it will spoil the whole cache. So these women were masters of saving seeds. In our traditional planting practices, when we save these corns, but not all of it will be used for seed, only this portion of the corn cob will be used for seed. And the thinking is the best is in the middle, and that's what's going to bring the next generation of corn for us, or the next season's worth of corn for us, just like the child comes from the middle of the woman. So this is the corn mother section of the corn, or cob of corn. We were the first farming mothers that gave birth to the corn population that we all enjoy now.
Selecting the best seed from each generation to grow for next year used to be a central part of farming. As central as watering or weeding, it wasn't possible to farm without seed saving, and those practices gave us the food we eat today.
We've become so disconnected with the way things used to be. Everyone used to have a garden at one point.
Mm-hmm. Everyone used to save seeds.
Yeah, everyone used to save seed.
If you had a garden, you had to save seed.
Yeah, you had to save seed because prior to the creation of seed companies, it was what you got from your neighbors or what you've had for centuries, or thousands of years if you're an indigenous group of people.
This is basically a gift in my hands from generations of grandmothers before me.
Everyone was growing either their own family heirloom of corn or a local variety that was a heirloom or a landrace. It was seed saving, which humanity has done for thousands of years. It's part of who we are as a human species.
Part of what growing, harvesting, caring for things that are growing then helps us better understand who we are as a human being.
Part of what it means to be human is to be a saver of seed. No other species has as intimate a symbiosis with corn as we do. And if we are to continue our partnership with corn into future generations, then we need to be present for the entire life cycle, from the very beginning, long before harvest, before the kernels are even pollinated.
Corn is wind pollinated, so it's not insects at all, it's wind. So whenever they tassel up, their pollen is on those tassels, the wind blows it around and they pollinate each other, and that's how we get corn. Corn sex, but yay!
There's nothing that I love more than seeing good pollinated corn kernels all the way to the very tip where everybody got pollinated. Yeah, so if you have good pollination, you're gonna get a full cob of corn like this, all uniform, perfect. If you do not have good pollination, you will get things like the tip of these. These silks did not get properly pollinated. The different varieties of corn have their tassels and silks emerge at different time frames throughout their life cycles. And those silks that are each attached to a corn kernel will be taking up the sperm from the tassels to the silks. Being that they're wind pollinated, we have a system that to be able to grow different varieties of corn in the same season.
If you plant them about a month apart, they will tassel not at the same time. There will not be pollen that can cross-pollinate with each other because of that time period. So you can literally plant two types of corn right next to each other, but do it a month apart.
So I use a calendar to make sure that I'm planting when they aren't going to be maturing at the same time, so that I give each variety a chance to be properly pollinated and not cross with their neighbors, so that I can grow other varieties.
I grew 2 corn successfully for seed companies this year. Did one for a little small plot for So True Seed. I did one for Baker Creek, and then I had my regular sweet corn, extremely large patch of that for all my CSA customers. And the way that I did that was through timing. That's how I'm able to do that. So, you know, in April, planting the first corn, May another one, and then June or July another one. And I'm able to pull that off.
So if you want to grow multiple varieties of corn, but don't want their genes getting all mixed together, you can stagger your planting throughout the season so that each variety reaches sexual maturity at a different time. And if you want even finer grained control over your corn's sexual habits, hand pollination is also quite simple.
Hand pollinating is not that hard. It's really easy to do. It's just time consuming if you have a lot like I grow. When you're doing this, you want to be very gentle bringing this down, because a lot of the time these will snap off. But you basically just put them in the bag, shake, and then let it go back up. And then all of your pollen and anthers is in the bag, which is what you will use to cross with. And if it is a dark golden yellow, you do not want to use it, because that means the pollen is not viable any longer. Fresh, good pollen should be a nice light creamy butter color. And each silk is a kernel, so each one would have to get pollinated before you have a complete ear of corn. And then you just gently shake pollen and anthers all around your silk. Some will fall off, that's okay. Corn silk is very sticky, so pollen sticks to it pretty easily. And then you just take your bag and put it over your ear, and then the one thing I don't have is a stapler, but you would staple the back of this, and then this will stay on until you harvest.
Apart from keeping your corn properly isolated so that the different varieties don't mix, growing corn for seed is virtually identical to growing it for food, because corn seed is food. You just have to harvest the cobs when they're dry.
If you're going to save your own seeds, I don't pull the ears off until they are completely dry. Just hear that beautiful crunchy sound.
Pulling them out of here, snap them off, stick them in baskets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I need it for seed, buddy.
Once harvested, corn cobs are husked and then sorted.
We sort into 3 categories at least, which is like seed stock, cornmeal, and then like animal feed. And then if we're growing for seed, then it would be seed stock, seed, cornmeal, animal feed.
One of the differences between growing corn for just food and additionally growing some for seed is the number of categories that it gets sorted into. Seed savers try to save the very best seed for themselves to grow out next year, and then the next best to sell to other farmers. Only after these needs are met can the corn be sorted further for human or animal consumption, and then it all gets processed and removed from the cob.
This is a corn sheller. This is actually my great-grandfather's. It's about 100-ish years old, I think, a little over, and very simple to use. Cob corn.
Once the corn is shelled, it can be bagged and weighed and shipped to a seed company.
And it's really easy to do. That's a testament to how easy it is to save corn. It has traveled the whole globe so quickly and taken so many different shapes and forms.
The diversity of corn is somewhat paradoxical. Despite the thousands of varieties developed over thousands of years, most are not grown today, and only a small handful of lineages are grown at any scale. And those agribusinesses that do grow those few popular varieties have a strong economic incentive to maintain their genetic monopoly.
So they discovered this corn in Mexico like 4 or 5 years ago. That on those roots that come out, it does it naturally, and it produces like this jelly-looking substance from the roots that contains pure nitrogen. I've got a friend that is growing that in North Carolina this year, that corn, to just get the seed stock out there, and she has had to sign like a non-disclosure agreement that no seeds will be shared, nothing else. I think they're calling it the Mayan Jaguar. If they come to find out that she did save any of the seeds or share it with anybody, it's $1 million penalty. Yeah, I mean it's crazy.
Who owns seeds?
Who owns seeds?
I'm not into it.
I'm not into it either.
Yeah, I grew corn this year, and this was my first experience growing corn, and I ordered some sweet corn varieties. The box came and I opened it, and on top of the seed packet there was, like, before I can even access the seed packet, was a letter that's like, you have to agree that by planting this corn you agree to, these, I don't know, these terms. And the terms were like, you cannot save this seed, you cannot try to trial it out and grow it and crossbreed it. I mean, there just was a long list of terms and requirements, and it was a bit jarring because that was the first experience I've had with a seed that had sort of like that level of, I guess, protection or restrictions on its use. So I planted it, but it also definitely makes me not want to order seeds, at least from that company again.
The majority of corn seed grown today cannot be saved for both legal and genetic reasons. And so growing corn varieties that you can save seeds from isn't just about reclaiming our heritage as farmers. It's also about self-determination.
All of the corn you see in the fields today, you cannot just go out and pick an ear and save seed. It is copyrighted material that you're stealing, basically. The majority of the corn that feeds humanity is GMO, is a hybrid of that nature. It's patented, it's copyrighted, you cannot save seed out of it. And what people like me and other breeders, heirloom breeders and seed savers are doing, we're steering away from that copywriting. Everything I breed and what a bunch of people breed and create is under the Safe Seed Pledge. It's open pollinated, and no one can take it and take genes out of it to copyright. They cannot use it in GMO breeding. It is free to the public, and that's the way most of us want to keep it. I don't want anything I ever grow or create to be patented because I don't believe in it. To me, that is against natural order, because we humans don't own anything. It's all a gift from creation.
But, of course, while it's tempting to hold on to nostalgia for the old days when plant varieties could not be owned, the economic forces that produced copyrighted hybrids also constrain what small-scale breeders can accomplish.
The worst part about being a breeder is it's very hard to protect your work. Because people want to take it, They think they buy it one time and then they own it, and then they get access to all your work, and then they can sell it, make money off of it, and you get cut out of the middle.
It's important to remember that at its core, seed saving is a shared act of symbiosis. We benefit, the corn benefits, and we grow and change together. As corn and its farmers and breeders have adapted to a globally industrialized world, the balance of those benefits have changed, but the core need to save seed is as present and as important as it was thousands of years ago.
And it's really important, just as a seed saver, you are holding on to that bit of ecological wonder. Okay, this corn that is 1,000 years old, I did it again. I saved it again. You know, it's amazing to feel that almost ancient wisdom coming from it. Like, okay, you know, the Mayans planted this back thousands of years ago, and I did it. I did just what they did. I mean, you almost feel that ancestral and spiritual feeling flowing through it. It really is.
The seeds aren't just a commercial, consumer, economic relationship, but there is also a spiritual relationship that's long-standing.
There's a spirituality to do with it, because you've been working with that symbiotic relationship. You eat the plants. We eat the plants that nourishes us, and then you nourish them to that full fruition and save the seeds, and it's so beautiful. It really is. So that brings you such a it's just a beautiful feeling to see it. I'm sorry. It's just,
No, I love it. And I think that's a philosophy a lot of people need to understand. It's an ongoing process where you and the crop are cooperating and changing and growing together, and you have to have an eye for that, and you have to be very attentive.
Few crops have changed more than corn has in the 9,000 years since we first domesticated it, and the changes to our society have been no less profound. The relationship between corn and humanity is far from over, and as the world has globalized, our partnership has entered a new and critical phase. So much of the corn that is grown today contains the same inbred genes repeated over and over and over across the globe. In this context, continuing to save our own diverse corn varieties is more important today than it ever was. Big thanks to our video series sponsors, and thanks to our media sponsors. This project was funded by Southern SARE.